Good morning. Thank you for joining us here today. We are gathered on the traditional territory of the signatories of Treaty 6 and 7, and I acknowledge the Métis people who share a deep connection with this land. I'm Jaelene Tweedle, the Alberta NDP candidate for Red Deer North. I'm proud to stand here today with my colleague Michelle Baer, the Alberta NDP candidate for Red Deer South, David Shepherd, the Alberta NDP critic for health, and of course our leader Rachel Notley. We are here today to affirm the Alberta NDP's commitment to the Red Deer Regional Hospital expansion. The chaos in our healthcare system and the need to improve the Red Deer Hospital is top of mind for many here. Just this past weekend, while outdoor knocking, I spoke to a nurse who used to work at the Foothills Medical Centre in Calgary and now works at Red Deer Hospital. She said she was shocked to see how underserved and understaffed our hospital is and how it was literally bursting at the seams. She spoke of levels of staff burnout that she was simply unprepared for. I wish I could tell you that this is the only story such as this that I've heard, but I have heard the words helpless, hopeless, and desperate much too often. We must take action, and I can promise you that Michelle, David, Rachel, and myself will fight to end the chaos in our healthcare system. I would now like to turn it over to my friend Michelle Baer.
Thank you, Jaelene. First of all, I would like to thank the doctors, the nurses, the paramedics, the healthcare aides, the lab techs, the pharmacists, and everyone who works so hard to keep our hospital running in the face of the chaos that Danielle Smith and the UCP are creating. I want to assure you that at the Alberta NDP, we hear you and we see the struggles you face daily. To all of you, we say thank you. Last week, the Red Deer ER department wait times were as long as 18 hours, and nurses reported that they were worried about patient safety. Staff shortages, unit closures, hallway medicine put our hospital in a staffing crisis every single day. The harm Danielle Smith and the UCP have done to our healthcare system and the impact this is having on Red Deer Hospital is the biggest reason I chose to run. We have an infrastructure crisis here and an HR crisis. We've had ambulances lined up 14 deep in the loading bays. We've had helicopters flying patients out 3 to 4 times a day. We are losing doctors, specialists in droves. And this is at the 3rd busiest specialized hospital in the province. And that's why I'm proud to be here today as Rachel outlines our commitments to the Red Deer Hospital expansion. The expansion project has been delayed for way too long, and the secrecy that the UCP has kept around this project has only caused more frustration. Recently, we learned that the project will be delayed another 2 years. And sadly, this news will likely not come as a huge surprise to the hospital staff and everybody who relies on the hospital services. It's just another failed commitment by to the people of Red Deer by the UCP. We can't afford to keep delaying this expansion. When we are in government, we will get the hospital expansion done and address the crisis in healthcare all across Alberta. And so to speak more about that, I'm very pleased to introduce our leader, Rachel Notley.
Thank you so much, Jaelene and Michelle. I want to thank you both for your strong advocacy and for your hard work on this critical issue, particularly within this community. And of course, I want to thank you, David Shepherd, for his several years of work at this point, attempting to fend off UCP chaos and instead advocating for a better way within our healthcare system. You know, I believe all of us together will play a critical role in an Alberta NDP government that will provide stability, that will manage public health care with competence, and that will truly care for the people working on our front lines. I also want to thank the Society for Hospital Expansion in Central Alberta, or SHICA, for taking the time to meet with us this morning and discuss the severe challenges facing patients and healthcare workers in both short-term and the long-term. These problems affect families not just in the city and county of Red Deer, but across Central Alberta. The UCP government has failed to deliver any substantial progress on expanding the Red Deer Hospital in nearly 4 years. So I'm here today to tell the people of Alberta that they have quietly delayed this project, as Michelle mentioned, even further. Let me give you a little bit of the history on this. In 2019, the UCP mirrored our NDP campaign commitment to move ahead with the Red Deer Hospital expansion. After being elected, they then delayed the project repeatedly without really any form of transparency or accountability. Just delay after delay without clear communication as to why. Ultimately, they promised that construction would begin in 2021. Today, January of 2023, there still hasn't been any signs of construction. Now, last November, because of all this delay and more concerns being raised, the Ministry of Infrastructure committed that the hospital expansion would be complete by 2030 or 2031. Today, documents that became public earlier this month actually reveal that the project has been delayed a further 2 years until 2032 or 2033. This is more incompetence and more chaos from this UCP government. And frankly, the people of Red Deer shouldn't have to look to the official opposition to be notified of delays to critical infrastructure. This is chaotic and incompetent leadership, and it's unacceptable. The people in Red Deer and throughout central Alberta deserve honesty, and they deserve transparency, and they deserve for the Red Deer Regional Hospital to be a priority. Not more secrecy, not more empty promises. So that's why I'm here. In addition to revealing to the people of Red Deer that their hospital has been delayed a further 2 years, I'm also here today to commit to you that an Alberta NDP government will take a different path. And so I commit the following. If elected, we will press forward urgently with the expansion of the Red Deer Hospital, and we will explore any opportunity there is to speed up that timeline. The Red Deer Hospital is regularly running over capacity, as these folks here have described. And by the time we hit the early 2030s, Red Deer will not have had a single new bed in over 30 years. And in addition, I want to be very clear that an Alberta NDP government will never pursue a P3 model of construction in relation to the development of the Red Deer Hospital. I say that because we have also seen in these documents that were recently released that the UCP is contemplating a P3 model of construction, despite also admitting in a different setting that this horrible construction model has led to further delays on the construction of much-needed schools across the province. So, it's a bad idea, and it will only cause further delays. We won't do it. In addition, as part of our commitment to the most ambitious plan Alberta has ever seen to recruit and train new healthcare workers, we will ensure that the hospital here in Red Deer will be fully staffed. Even before that, we will aggressively recruit and train healthcare professionals to staff the existing hospital and the existing specialized services, which we heard today are under so much stress and strain from staffing shortages. Finally, I commit to the people in Red Deer and across central Alberta that an Alberta NDP government will be transparent with the project's timeline. And if there are changes or delays, we will communicate it respectfully, transparently. We'll provide regular updates to local governments, to SHICA, to the public, so everyone knows exactly where we're at, what happens next, and when it will happen. So, in summary, I'm committed to staffing up the existing hospital, building the new hospital, and keeping everyone well informed as we go forward. We must do better to make sure that the people in the Red Deer region can get the health care they need when they need it close to home. And that's exactly what we will deliver. I believe an Alberta NDP government will provide stable, competent leadership. That is my commitment. And in so doing, we will end the chaos in healthcare right here in central Alberta. And we will ensure public health care is there for every person in Red Deer and the surrounding communities when they need it. So thank you, and we're happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you. We'll take questions in person. Lana Michelin from the Red Deer Advocate. Could you please expand upon these documents that were found earlier this month that indicate that there is going to be a 2-year delay in hospital construction?
So in our press release, just for your reference, we have a link to them. But what they are is they are on a government website that outlines the RFP process, and embedded in those documents are the actual timelines for completion. And you will see in them that that timeline for completion has been quietly changed, as I said, to 2032/2033. And that, as you know, is a further 2-year delay past what the minister talked to people about just in November of 2022.
Do you have a follow-up? We'll go to our next.
Hi, Alessia from RD News Now. Would you mind maybe perhaps reminding the public of certain specific examples of how you helped the Red Deer Hospital under your leadership, as we know that this hospital crisis has been here for quite some time, as well as the hospital expansion project?
Right. So, there's no question that conversations about expanding services, as well as the construction of the hospital in Red Deer, have been going on for quite some time. And as a result of that, what we ultimately did was we insisted that we create a project going forward list when we redesigned how we would talk to Albertans about capital construction, and we put it on that list. And then we funded the preliminary scoping work that needed to be done in 2019. So, and at that time, we committed that we would go forward as per the recommendations that came from that project. But then, since then, it's basically not been moving, or probably hasn't really started moving until maybe the last 6 months.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah. I was reading up on past articles, and I know that in 2018, the Red Deer Regional Hospital was not deemed a priority on the priority list and later moved back onto the priority list. So what would you say to Red Deerians who maybe have questions of why is it a priority now, and how will you make change under your leadership?
For sure. So originally, what happened was, going back into that period of time, we had oil was running around $25 a barrel, and we had a number of competing priorities and fewer resources to work with. At that time, AHS recommended other priorities instead of Red Deer, and they shifted it. And it took us, quite honestly, I'll be very frank, a couple of years to reconsider that and overrule that and decide that, no, we needed to get this back on the active list, which is what we did while still in government. So the other thing, of course, that's happened is that there's been other, the pressures have grown in Red Deer since that time, and we know that pressures are growing across the province in a whole bunch of different ways. But because of the unique position that Red Deer occupies as a city that offers a pretty full range of specialized services, yet in a smaller setting, the pressures have perhaps been felt more intensely here, and the need has grown at a greater rate. And for that reason, we are completely behind moving forward with what we'd originally announced in 2019, which is to make this a priority and to do whatever we can to speed up the timelines and get that work done on behalf of the people of Central Alberta.
Thank you. We'll move to questions online. A reminder to press *9 if you're dialing in by phone, or use the raise hand function on Zoom. We'll go to our first caller. First caller is Michelle Baer from CBC.
Something off topic. So this morning, the CEO of Synovus, in an article by Chris Barco of the Calgary Herald, suggested that he's fine with the idea of the just transition legislation. And here's a quote: "I would be concerned if I thought that it was going to turn into a serious attempt to kind of move highly paid workers out of the oil and gas industry and into new industries, but I don't think that is what the federal government's intent is. This transition, if done correctly, and if we're able to materially decarbonize a Canadian barrel of oil, I actually think it would result in more jobs and materially more jobs in the Canadian energy sector." So my question to you is, Rachel, is he doesn't seem to have a problem with it, so why do you?
I think a lot of the objectives that Poor Bay outlined actually align with the objectives that I have, and probably the objectives that many others have too. The challenge that I have is that it was just at the beginning of this week that we became aware of documentation that was talking about an extremely wide-ranging scope of consequence, specifically to Alberta, arising from changes that would occur over an undetermined timeline. Now, in my view, that kind of conversation has to involve Albertans. And it should not be happening in Ottawa in isolation from Albertans. Now, it would be nice if we didn't have a provincial government that had been enmeshed in its own internal chaos, followed now by an unprecedented level of incompetence, such that we are in a position where no one is fully aware of what is being planned. No one understands the particular elements of the path forward. No one is fully aware of the exact amount of money that is associated with it. And so that conversation must be centered here in Alberta, and it hasn't been. And so what we are saying is that absolutely, as an Alberta NDP politician, as the leader of our opposition, as the former premier, I am absolutely committed to making ambitious and real progress on reducing our emissions. And I've always believed that we have to look at that project as one that we do in concert with economic growth and ensuring good paying, sustainable, long-term industrial jobs. The question is, I am not comfortable with taking a leap of faith and trusting everybody in Ottawa with a plan that folks here have not been let in on and that our provincial government has not engaged on. And that's why we have to make sure that we get these things right. And I hope that the good faith expectations and aspirations that Alex Porbay outlined in that article today are indeed the ones we achieve. But I think Albertans deserve to be part of that conversation, and we deserve to know more about what is being planned before folks in Ottawa start making decisions that impact primarily Alberta.
Do you have a follow-up, Michelle?
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't it be fair to say, though, that we'll get those details when the bill is introduced? So I have to ask you, I mean, and I am playing devil's advocate here, but how much is your position on this just transition legislation based more on a desire to appeal to centrist voters who might otherwise vote PC, if they had that option, in May?
My position here is focused on protecting the rights of Alberta workers. Full stop. The end. And that has always been my position. And I think there is opportunity in the road ahead, but I also think that there, as we know, for instance, from the Federal Auditor General's report, that there is also opportunity for big potholes, and there's opportunities to drive into the ditch, and there's opportunities for hardworking Albertans to be left on the side of the road. And those are the things that I cannot stand by and cross my fingers and hope doesn't happen. And so the reality is that that work hasn't been done. It should have been done, but let me just reiterate, we are in a position that is jaw-droppingly uncommon and unnecessary and unfortunate in that we have a chaotic, distracted, incompetent provincial government that is hearing about the scope of this project through FOIP documents that they didn't apparently ever read before. And that shouldn't be happening, and they shouldn't have allowed themselves to simply refuse to be at the table for all this time. But that being said, that doesn't let the federal government or anybody in Ottawa off the hook for their obligation to engage with Albertans on something that is going to have big consequences for Alberta workers.
And with that, we'll go to our next caller. Go ahead, caller. Your line is unmuted.
Hi, Hi, this is Lisa Johnson from the Edmonton Journal. Sorry, I have another off-topic question. I was wondering, Rachel, if you could speak to this. Obviously, there were concerns about the rollout of the government's affordability check portal, which happened yesterday, and we've heard some concerns from Albertans who are frustrated by the process or came up with a hotline that was overwhelmed and they couldn't get through. I'm wondering what your MLAs are hearing from their constituents about the application process.
So we've been hearing from folks, not only from our constituents, but in fact from folks all across Alberta, that people are struggling to get access, that they're having to spend way too much time, that they can't get access to technical support, and they're not convinced that they've actually managed to register their request, and that's of course for folks who can access, who have internet access, who have computers, who can do all this stuff online. We all know that often people who are most in need of this kind of affordability support don't have access to any of those tools that I just described. As we've said before, there was a way to get this done, to get money into people's pockets faster, that involved just a little bit less fanfare for the UCP and the Premier, and that was to do this in concert with the Canadian Revenue Agency. They're not doing that, and instead what we're going to see, I suspect, is that Albertans are going to have to work really hard to get access to these checks. Hopefully most of them will ultimately succeed. But as you know, the other concern we have is that there's a huge group of very deserving and needing Albertans who aren't getting access to this support.
Do you have a follow-up?
No, thank you.
And with that, we'll go to our next caller. Go ahead, caller. Your line is unmuted.
Hi, it's Graham Thompson with the Star today. Going back to the Just Transition documents, I guess these were briefing notes given to Natural Resources Minister, but they were online in September, so I'm assuming the NDP didn't notice them either. Is that right?
No, we sure didn't, and you know, it would have been good if we had the capacity to be going through all these Ottawa documents in that level of detail. But I will say, if we'd been in government, we would have known about them. But more to the point, you know, and there has been, I think, legitimate discussion, Graham, about how the original characterization of these documents and the characterization that Danielle Smith continues to apply to them is not particularly accurate. But what I was struck by in the documents was the very clear language talking about a, quote, significant disruption to particular sectors that include hundreds of thousands of workers and that will disproportionately affect Alberta. And there was no timeline around it. But I have to say that in the sort of public messaging, which is quite honestly most of what we only have access to as opposition, we'd not ever heard that kind of language before. And so it made us very concerned that there is a scope of activity that is intended that will have big consequences. And it is important for, as I've said before, for Alberta to have a competent and voice at the table. And 2.5 months, well, quite honestly, we're into the red zone now, but 2.5 months before an election or whatever it is, this is not the time for these kinds of decisions to be happening in Ottawa without Albertans being able to engage.
So would you consider yourself an ally when it comes to Smith calling for an end to the Just Transition? I know you're saying put the brakes on it, not necessarily kill the whole thing, but it seems that you and the Premier are sort of on the same side on an issue for once.
You know, I just cannot bring myself to go quite there, Graham, because here's the thing. The UCP and currently Danielle Smith seem to be trying to use their incompetence, use their chaos, use their conflict as a tool to pretend that the rest of the world has nothing else going on in it and nothing else is out there that will impact Alberta. And that's not true. The fact of the matter is that international markets are demanding that we change the nature of one of Alberta's biggest export products, and that we do it reasonably quickly and responsibly. As the hopeful leader of the province, or someone observing the current leader of the province, it is incumbent upon the provincial government to play an important role advocating for working people in this province in the course of the work that is associated with meeting the objectives I just described. And what has happened is that the UCP, because they've been embroiled in their own chaos for 18 months, because they struggle to show competence on the best of days, has completely failed to be at the table and to stand up for Alberta workers. They're more interested in the 24-hour news cycle rather than the hard work of advocating and negotiating and securing the greatest number of resources for Albertans. So as a result of that, Graham, the path that the Premier has taken to get to this point compared to the path that we have taken, and the fact that we can kind of see each other on the same path briefly, is not enough for me to ever suggest that we are allies, because I have no faith in the competence or the willingness of this government to actually do the work that's necessary to support Albertans and Alberta oil and gas workers going forward.
And we'll go to our next caller, Dean Bennett. Go ahead, Dean. Your line is unmuted. We don't seem to get any audio from you, Dean. Dean, we'll follow up with you later, and we'll do one more pass for questions.
Okay, we'll just take one more pass for questions in the room, too. Any more?
Say none. Oh, sorry.
Was there anything in the documents that you saw pertaining to the hospital delay that would explain the delay at all? Like, because an election is coming up, and we have made our case, I think, here in Red Deer quite strongly. Just wondering if you have
It's
any
not.
sense
It's
of
not
why.
there. When you look at the documents, I'm sure you'll get a chance to do that. You'll see it's in a chart format. And there isn't really an explanation. It's just new dates. There is a subsequent or a separate conversation, or in the document about the sort of RFP to scope out the potential for P3 arrangements and to look at how much that would engage in the overall project and who would be a good P3 partner, and yada, yada, yada. So I would suggest that may well be part of what's driving the delay. But I'm not, that's pure speculation because it doesn't say that overtly. I think, the bottom line is this. In our government, we said yes to the Calgary Cancer Centre in 2015. 7 years later, it's just about... no, it's not 7 years. It's like 8 years later. It's just about to open. So these things do take time. But the point is that there needs to be dedicated resources to making this a priority within HS, and there needs to be regular reporting to Albertans about what they can expect the timelines to be.
And with that concludes today's press conference.
Thank you very
everyone.
much.